Coming up, the first of a CBS 46 News unprecedented report. Just about every day, we report on someone being shot. Some of those shootings turn deadly.
But what is the truth about gun crimes in Metro Atlanta?
We will always have some form of crime because we're a major American city.
Up next, CBS 46 News examines the question, are we becoming a homicide hotbed? Beyond the numbers, as we look at the gunfight right here and across the nation. That's next. Guns in Georgia. Those words alone spark debate.
All this week, CBS 46 News takes you beyond the headlines and breaks down the facts, pro and con, about guns and the law.
The CBS 46 News team looks at loopholes in the law and the money that influences gun politics.
Plus, the honest prospects about gun control and if it really works.
No matter what your stance is, this unprecedented look at the gun debate will give you new perspective on the issue.
Join us for the gunfight all this week on CBS 46 News.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do.
A mother's anguish hours after her 22-year-old son is gunned down right in front of her in Riverdale earlier this year. It's a scene that's becoming all too common in our state and across the country. All this week at 4, 5, 6, and 11. CBS 46 News brings you unprecedented coverage of guns in Georgia. The gunfight. No matter where you stand, you'll get a look at guns, gun violence, and gun laws that you've never seen before. And the big question, is Metro Atlanta quickly becoming a homicide hotbed?
It is a question right here at CBS 46 News that we discuss the amount of violent crime we cover each and every day. So, Ben, take a look at this. Staggering numbers, the most recent released by the CDC. 11,208 people died from gun homicides in the United States in 2013. So what about Metro Atlanta? We're breaking down our numbers. Here's Vince Sims.
Perception and reality aren't always the same. We wanted to know the reality about gun murders in and around our area. I've poured through pages and pages of data from surrounding counties to bring you the truth about gun homicides in our area. September 25th, a shootout in the middle of the day at a Gwinnett County gas station. October 5th, a man on a motorcycle seen pointing a gun at a driver. Fortunately, those scenes caught on camera did not end in death, but all too often, death is the end result of a gun being pulled. Former State General Assembly member Douglas Dean watched as homicide detectives investigated a gun murder in his neighborhood on October 23rd. A man was shot and killed at 10:30 in the morning.
We need to get guns out of the hands of the wrong people. And the way you do that is you got to discourage folks from thinking that the only way they can settle something is by guns and shooting people and stuff like that.
According to Fulton County Police, in 2012, there were 14 gun murders. 2013 rose to 16. 2014 and 15 went back down to 14 murders by gun. The numbers of gun murders is only slightly lower for neighboring Cobb County Police. In 2011, there were 12. In 2012, they saw 10. In 2013, it jumped to 14 and went back down in 2014 to only 10. 2015 has seen 8 so far. Looking specifically at Atlanta gun deaths, in 2011, there were 71. That dropped in 2012 to 63. But then those numbers rose in 2013 to 72 and in 2014 to 76. So far in 2015, we're sitting at 66 gun deaths.
What the cause of death was, and GSW means gunshot.
Major Adam Lee III is with Atlanta Police Homicide. With concern about all homicides, he views Atlanta's numbers of gun homicides like this.
There hasn't been an extreme change over the years to the point where it would be alarmingly high from last year to this year or the previous year to the year before.
Atlanta Mayor Kasim Reed lays some of the blame for the city's gun murder issue on state laws.
When we take illegal guns off the street, under Georgia state law right now, we actually have to return them or make them available to the public in some form. So we used to be able to destroy illegal guns. We're no longer able to do that anymore.
Atlanta isn't alone when it comes to gun deaths per capita here in Georgia. According to the CDC, 7 Georgia counties had the highest gun death rates per 100,000 people. Besides Fulton and DeKalb, also included are Muskogee, Bibb, Richmond, Colquitt, and Chatham counties. Major Lee says the lack of key things in a young person's life, plus a bad element, is behind many of Atlanta's gun deaths.
Education and parenting. It doesn't necessarily have to be an actual parent, but just having a good role model in your life, and the influence of gangs and gang memberships.
As work continues to decrease the number of gun homicides, Mayor Reed admits it's a battle that will never end.
We will always have some form of crime because we're a major American city. But what matters is how people feel. And I just want people to know that I'm focused on this every single day.
In Atlanta, any guns seized by the police can be claimed by the rightful owner or be used for city use. If not, they're held in storage. Atlanta has not auctioned or destroyed any guns in the past 2 years. In Atlanta, Vince Sims, CBS 46 News.
Yeah, you know, Ben, I just got back from a meeting with the APD Police Chief George Turner this afternoon. I actually got inside that storage locker where all of those weapons are held, so we'll have more on that in the days ahead.
Absolutely, and also Sharon, all this week, our reality check segments, they're going to dive deeper into the gunfight. And in our next hour, we're going to take a closer look at a very controversial issue, the Second Amendment. It is among the most controversial and contentious elements of the Bill of Rights. But is it outdated? Do you even understand it? My reality check at 5.
Then at 6, anchor Tracy Hutchins focuses on mass shootings. It's a national tragedy, the link between the gunmen and how many are getting their weapons. Then tonight at 11, my investigation into the so-called Iron Pipeline, that hidden route from Atlanta to New York. Young people, illegal gun runners, and turning Georgia guns into killing machines.
Our special coverage continues all week here on CBS 46 News, CBS46.com, and on our mobile app. We invite you to join the conversation on our website and through our social media channels. The Second Amendment, so controversial, so contentious, so hard to understand. What if everything you know about the Second Amendment is wrong? We'll give you a reality check after the break. Guns in Georgia. Those words alone spark debate.
All this week, CBS 46 News takes you beyond the headlines and breaks down the facts, pro and con, about guns and the law.
The CBS 46 News team looks at loopholes in the law and the money that influences gun politics.
Plus, the honest prospects about gun control and if it really works.
No matter what your stance is, this unprecedented look at the gun debate will give you new perspective on the issue.
Join us for the gunfight all this week on CBS 46 News.
The right to keep and bear arms. It may be the single most controversial and most contentious right listed in our Bill of Rights. And much of the root of that contention is an understanding what the founders and the framers actually meant. What is the Second Amendment really about? You may not like it, but this is a reality check you won't see anywhere else. You know, so many questions over the Second Amendment. Is the amendment outdated? If the founders and framers had really been aware of the kind of weaponry we would have today, would they have included that right to keep and bear arms in the Bill of Rights? Is the Second Amendment about hunting and sportsmanship? Let's begin with the actual language of the Second Amendment. It says this, quote, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Now, some legal analysts say it was not until the 1980s that the militia part of the Second Amendment became ignored, and thanks to an all-out push by the NRA, the meaning of the Second Amendment was expanded from militia to the individual. CNN legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin writes this, quote, "The reinterpretation of the Second Amendment was an elaborate and brilliantly executed political operation inside and outside of government. Ronald Reagan's election in 1980 brought a gun rights enthusiast to the White House. At the same time, Orrin Hatch, the Utah Republican, became chairman of an important subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he commissioned a report that claimed to find, quote, clear and long-lost proof that the Second Amendment to our Constitution was intended as an individual right of the American citizen to keep and carry arms in a peaceful manner for protection of himself, his family, and his freedoms." Now, Toobin's analysis may be historically correct in as far as the change in modern or public view of the Second Amendment, but he's absolutely wrong when he indicates that the Second Amendment did not originally mean private ownership of a gun for individuals. Again, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and to bear arms shall not be infringed. So what is a well-regulated militia? What were the framers talking about really? You know, of all the fears of the Founding Fathers, none was stronger than their fear of standing armies. As David Young has observed, quote, the necessity of an armed populace, protection against disarming of the citizenry, and the need to guard against a select militia and assure a real militia which could defend liberty against any standing forces the government might raise were topics interspersed throughout the ratification period. Now, this may be a very foreign concept, but the very first fight over the Second Amendment was not over whether the population should be armed. Reality check here. All the framers and the founders agreed with that idea. It was a given at that time. Everyone was armed. No, the fight was between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists over whether we would have a standing army. The Anti-Federalists, among them George Mason, Patrick Henry, and Samuel Adams, they were militant advocates of the inclusion of a Bill of Rights in the Constitution because they did not trust the power of the federal government to be restrained. Don Cates, a constitutional and Second Amendment scholar, he points out that, quote, during the ratification debate, the Federalists vehemently denied that the federal government would have the power to infringe freedom of expression, religion, and other basic rights, expressly including the right to arms. In this context, Madison secured ratification by his commitment to support and to safeguard the fundamental rights that all agreed should never be infringed. In short, Federalists, including men like John Jay, James Madison, George Washington, they wanted the Second Amendment because they believed that a strong federal government would be able to control a standing army. The Anti-Federalists, they wanted it because it would mean every able-bodied man in America would be armed in the event that the federal government or America's own standing army turned on its own people. I told you, it's a very hard truth here, and really that's what you need to know. The Second Amendment is not about hunting or even just about defense of your own home. It was written by men who ultimately believed that governments and armies would turn on their own people. The Second Amendment was written to guarantee that that would never happen. That's Reality Check. Let's talk about that tonight on Twitter.
And right now, many of you are already weighing in on this part of the series, Gunfight, with our CBS46.com question of the day.
We asked, has the fight to bear arms changed in meaning since the Constitution was written? So far, 23% of you said yes, 75% said no, and 2% said they were not sure. Head to our website to vote. Our in-depth look at the gunfight in Georgia and nationwide is just beginning here on CBS 46.
Coming up at 5:56, Just a Minute contributor Paul Crowley takes us inside one local town's gun battle that started decades ago. Then new at 6 o'clock, my in-depth look at mass shootings, specifically how the gunmen get a hold of their weapons. Hear what one local law enforcement expert says about the gunfight debate.
Then tonight at 11, my investigation that will show you why a route from Atlanta to New York is called the Iron Pipeline for gun runners. I'm up front with what's being done to stop it and save lives. Our special coverage continues all week on CBS 46 News, CBS46.com, and our mobile app. We invite you to join the conversation on our website and through our social media channels. And later, our week-long series, The Gunfight, continues. Ahead, our CBS 46 contributor takes us inside the big battle brewing right here at home that has gained international attention.
I'm Paul Crowley. Tonight at 5:56 on Just a Minute on CBS 46 News, how one local metro town has influenced the gun debate. I was there, and I'll tell you.
Opinions expressed during Just a Minute are not necessarily those of CBS 46 News or its employees. If you want to comment, you can go to CBS46.com and click on the Just a Minute tab. Comment there or on the CBS 46 Facebook page, or send us an email at justaminute@cbs46.com.
We're just getting started with our week-long look at the gunfight, bringing you all sides of the debate over firearms. And we want to hear from one of our CBS 46 contributors who's no stranger to this issue. Tonight, Paul Crowley takes just a minute to tell us evidence on the subject can be found just outside of Atlanta. It's a story he first covered 33 years ago.
I covered a local story in 1982 that made international headlines. Kennesaw, Georgia passed a law requiring the head of every household to own a gun. It exempted anyone who objected. Kennesaw's law was a political reaction to the Chicago suburb of Morton Grove, Illinois, banning handguns in their city. After both laws passed, Kennesaw's crime rate nosedived, Morton Grove's went up. Both sides of the gun debate have argued about this comparison, but it proves one thing. Some of the highest crime rates are in cities that have the toughest anti-gun laws. But what about last year's shooting spree at the FedEx warehouse in Kennesaw, where a gunman wounded 6 innocent employees and killed himself? Well, I covered that one too. The FedEx building was outside Kennesaw city limits, and it was a gun-free zone where the shooter had plenty of defenseless targets. Morton Grove, Illinois dropped their handgun ban in 2008 after the U.S. Supreme Court threw out a similar Washington, D.C. ban. Kennesaw still has its law, which has never been enforced, but many believe it's still a good deterrent against criminals looking for helpless victims. I'm Paul Crawley.
All this week, CBS 46 bringing you unprecedented coverage on guns in Georgia.
It's what we're calling the gunfight. It's so sad that mass shootings have become commonplace in this country. When we return, an in-depth look at what all of them appear to have in common. Guns in Georgia. Those words alone spark debate.
All this week, CBS 46 News takes you beyond the headlines and breaks down the facts, pro and con, about guns and the law.
The CBS 46 News team looks at loopholes in the law and the money that influences gun politics.
Plus, the honest prospects about gun control and if it really works.
No matter what your stance is, this unprecedented look at the gun debate will give you new perspective on the issue.
Join us for the gunfight all this week on CBS 46 News. All this week at 4, 5, 6, and 11, CBS 46 News brings you the gunfight. It is an unprecedented look at guns and our use of them in Georgia and beyond. No doubt these are divisive issues. One thing both Republican and Democratic voters can agree on: background checks. A Pew Research poll from July finds 88% of Democrats and 79% of Republicans favor background checks for sales at gun shows and private sales.
In fact, at this very moment, the search for a gunman at the center of yet another campus tragedy has just ended with the arrest of a former student.
It happened at the Winston-Salem State University in North Carolina yesterday. One student shot dead, another wounded after gunfire erupted near dorms there. Today, classes at the historically black university are back on schedule, but senseless shootings like this, they beg the question, how are those gunmen getting their weapons in the first place? CBS 46 anchor Tracy Hutchins in studio now with a look at a critical link. Tracy.
Well, Sharon and Ben, those numbers are staggering. The U.S. accounts for only 5% of the world's population, but we have nearly a third of the world's mass shooters. That is from a recent study by the American Sociological Association. We found the common components are access to guns and low self-esteem.
How many more people have to die? How many more parents have to cry out? I sent my child to school and they never made it home because someone who had a vendetta with someone else came in and shot 20 people.
Columbine, Fort Hood, Charleston. All communities devastated by mass shootings. Mass shootings are defined as 4 more people shot at one time. The tragic reality, there are too many other cities and towns to mention. So many, there is a mass shooting nearly every single day of the year in our country. According to the website shootingtracker.com, there have been more than 300 so far in 2015.
We've seen mass shootings in theaters, in the classrooms, in the workplace. Where is it safe for us?
In your own home. And even then you're not safe. But anytime you walk out your door, you're subject to be taken out at any given moment.
Vincent Hill spent 5 years in patrol and narcotics on the streets of Nashville. Now a private investigator in Atlanta, Hill says many of those mass gunmen have gotten their guns legally. Like Christopher Mercer, he killed 9 people at Umpqua Community College in Oregon. He owned 14 firearms. Police say he had 6 of them the day of the shooting, including an assault rifle and 3 pistols.
People get into this misconception that when they hear, oh, they purchased a gun legally, that it's from a gun store. But there's other ways to purchase a gun legally. You can go to a gun show. There's only 12 states that actually regulate background checks at a gun show. And also, if you're a private seller at a gun show, you don't have to perform a background check.
And if there is a background check, it only covers criminal convictions, not mental history.
Look at Vester in Virginia. He did not look crazy. He purchased that gun legally. So gun laws currently don't do any good for us.
Adam Lanza walked into Sandy Hook Elementary with 2 rifles that his mother obtained legally. But Lanza was untreated for years for anxiety and obsessive-compulsive disorder. He used his mother's guns to kill her and 26 others, mostly children.
If you were here one day and worked in a psychiatric clinic, you would wonder, why do we let these people have guns?
Dr. Dave Davis says his patients are asked if they're packing heat before they walk into the office at Piedmont Psychiatric Clinic. He says the link between mass gunmen is more of a personality disorder than mental illness.
One thing that seems to be common through them is self-esteem issues, poor, low self-esteem, feelings of being inadequate, no power, powerlessness, helplessness. If your self-esteem is rock bottom, a gun makes you a big man.
I think society, this country as a whole, is just going to have to say, hey, we're fed up with people dying on a daily basis. With over 300 people dead, that's a person a day that has died because of mass shooting. Until this country gets fed up with it, it won't change.
Now, there is no clear profile of a mass shooter, but in many cases, according to the National Institute of Justice, the triggermen are males. Other research shows they are white men in their 30s or 40s and have a history of struggling to connect.
And the other part of this, I guess, that's fairly interesting to people is that these are men who are seeking notoriety in some way, correct?
Absolutely. They know their name will be out there in some form. They want to be notorious. Recently, we've seen a trend of mass shooters mentioning the acts of previous mass shooters and glorifying them. They see it as a chance for everyone to know their name.
Tracy, thank you for that. And CBS 46, by the way, digging a little deeper into gun violence victims. Department of Justice data shows that men are disproportionately victims of firearm deaths. In 2010, the rate of firearm homicides for men was 6.2 per 100,000. That's compared with 1.1 for women.
And all new tonight at 11, my investigation into the so-called iron pipeline. Listen closely. You're about to hear a man from right here in Georgia busted and the wiretaps as he brags about running guns from Atlanta to the Big Apple.
I need a cat. Listen, I'm walking through Manhattan, right? Yeah. I've got 2 MAC-10 on me, a SK assault rifle, and 4 handguns, and I'm walking through New York. This is illegal as
Inside the iron pipeline, I spoke with one of the top men in the fight. Why our state gun laws make it so easy. My full investigation, all new tonight at 11.
Criminals from out of state committing crimes with Georgia guns. We take a closer look at the iron pipeline that starts right here in our neighborhoods. CBS 46 News is next. A gunfight.
These guns are being used to kill our children and to murder our police officers.
A disturbing number of Georgia guns are ending up in the hands of violent criminals out of state. But how are they getting so many of them so easily? We take a closer look at efforts to shut down Georgia's iron pipeline.
Now, a series of reports we're calling the gunfight. Just about every night, we report the news that can be tough to tell.
Lives lost at the hands of violent armed criminals. An in-depth report in just a moment. But first this, we are following the trail, looking into how firearms go from legal sales and then end up being used in crimes. Last year, the ATF recovered and traced 246,087 guns. Now, these are the states with the highest number of guns recovered and tracked. Georgia ranks number 5 behind Illinois, Texas, Florida, and California. The ATF, they were able to recover and trace 11,241 guns right here in Georgia.
And to my CBS 46 News investigation now and the so-called iron pipeline. It is big-time deadly commerce, and every time law enforcement breaks up one ring, more perps are ready to move weapons from Georgia to New York. Listen as police wiretaps catch a Georgia man boasting about his big gun business in the Big Apple.
I need a cat. Listen, I'm walking through Manhattan, right? Yeah. I've got 2 MAC-10 on me, a SK assault rifle, and 4 handguns, and I'm walking through New York. This is illegal as
Illegal because of New York's strict gun laws, some of the toughest in the U.S. Polar opposite of the state of Georgia, something Michael Basir, recently indicted as a gun-running ringleader, openly mocked on law enforcement wiretaps.
I'm selling them the right way and the wrong way. When I'm out of state, like in Atlanta and Georgia and all that, it's all legal, it's fully legal, but New York is completely illegal. So when I bring it up here and sell it up here, that's illegal.
But it's also big money, and according to the Brooklyn, New York District Attorney Ken Thompson, it's blood money.
These folks are merchants of death.
Thompson says Basir made more than $100,000 using straw purchases to buy cheap guns, several $100s each in the Atlanta area, flipping some for more than $1,000 per weapon in the state of New York. The MAC-10s and assault rifles too often end up in the hands of criminals who intend to murder.
These guns are being used to kill our children and to murder our police officers.
Thompson has been on the hunt for years, and to him and other members of the law enforcement community, it's personal.
New York City police officers were murdered with guns that originated from the state of Georgia. That is outrageous.
3 members of the NYPD in the last 11 months alone. Officers Wenjiang Liu, Rafael Ramos, and Brian Moore, all murdered with Georgia guns. 2 weeks ago, a 4th officer, Randolph Holder, also killed in the line of duty. That weapon was traced to neighboring South Carolina. I-85 links South Carolina and Georgia. It's all part of the so-called Iron Pipeline. Southern states with lax gun laws. They are so lax that gun runners load up here in metro Atlanta, then head up north where the big money waits.
It is easier in some communities to find a gun than it is to find some fresh vegetables and a supermarket. That's just a fact.
According to Thompson, back in 2013, Georgia took the top spot in the country for guns found at crime scenes, some 3,000. How are so many weapons being moved so quickly with deadly consequences? Cars traveling up Interstate 85 to 95 into New York. And planes until a December 2014 bust at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport closed a loophole allowing a then Delta employee to bypass TSA checkpoints, smuggling the weapons. But more recently, criminals are moving them on cheap buses where security is loose. So easy, so enticing. Some unlikely perpetrators are now getting in on the gun running.
What we're seeing is that folks who have never been arrested before, who have no criminal record, are buying these guns as straw purchasers, whether they be in Atlanta or Pittsburgh. So we have young people who ought to know better, who think that they can make a quick buck by buying guns legally, but then they're giving it to someone illegally.
Busting gun runners has become a never-ending task. Thompson says he and other DAs throughout the country are collaborating more and more.
You can't do it alone. You have a relationship with other DAs, your counterparts throughout the country, including in Atlanta with Paul Howard.
I had a conversation with DA Howard a week ago. We met in New York, and we talked about the gun violence that's happening around the country and the need to work together to stop the easy access to guns in places like Georgia and Virginia and other southern states.
But the big question, how much can one local prosecutor do to shut down the massive iron pipeline? You may be surprised to learn there are no federal gun trafficking laws. And Ben, late this afternoon, I sat down with the Atlanta Police Chief, George Turner. We talked about a lot of things, including what all of this violence means, violent crime right here in Atlanta. And tomorrow at 4, I am working on giving you a closer look at Georgia's gun laws. And I'll take you inside the APD evidence locker where more than 10,000 guns are sitting for now.
And then tomorrow at 5, I'll have a reality check for you when it comes to mass shootings. Has an armed citizen been able to stop one? You might be surprised. And then new at 6, magazines considered gun porn to some, why they're in plain sight and easy to reach for anyone to grasp.
Then at 11, we go there, black on black crime. I got off the desk and listened to people in some of Atlanta's hardest hit areas. Their own words, no filter. It is a raw conversation, uncomfortable at times, and it may take you out of your comfort zone. We invite you to join us.